What's up guys, today I'm going to show you every power mod you can do on an N52 engine. We're going to start from stock all the way up to 500 horsepower. I'm going to show you how to build it NA and also with a supercharger setup. Right now I'm running the 500 horsepower package from 22 RPD. They don't list it on the website, but if you email and ask, they can set you up with it. And essentially it is the smallest pulley that they carry for these, and they'll make about 14 PSI. So I haven't dynoed this setup since adding this intercooler and a couple other things, but I did make 480 wheel horsepower without the intercooler, just the standard 22 RPD stage 5 kit plus my bolt-ons. I also added these S54 headers this year. Shout out to Adam and Zach for modifying those to fit. And I will show you how to make those fit later on in the video. But the last time I had it dynoed, we were just running the Alibaba HC Racing headers. Water meth injection setup here. I ran the tank in my trunk, so I added this solenoid here. You want to have that if you have a trunk mounted reservoir. That prevents it from gravity feeding to the intake. And I run the first nozzle pre-supercharger, so that's cooling off this entire intake pipe and also the supercharger itself. The main nozzle, which is the bigger nozzle, is tapped into the charge pipe here, and that's raising the octane, lowering the IAT, and cooling off the cylinders. So basically methanol is your chemical intercooler if you're not running an intercooler. Meth reservoir setup, I swapped to an AEM reservoir just because it was bigger. I was running more methanol at the time, now I'm running less, so I don't really need this much. I also tapped it for a vent that leads outside of the car with a check valve. This prevents any fumes from releasing into the car. Always a good idea to have this and make sure that this does not let out fumes inside the car. And so I have this hose running out and down below outside of the car, because you don't want to breathe that stuff in. And now I'm going to teleport home for the rest of the video because it's freezing cold, and I will show you all the other steps you need to do for every other horsepower level.
Alright guys, welcome to my computer screen. So I'm going to walk you through all of these modifications you can do to your N52 from start to finish, and we're going to start on our website here, bevautoparts.com, and I have the whole guide that I'm about to go through with you now on this website, with links to everything as well. So if you're reading this, I would imagine you have an N52, and if it's stock, you're making anywhere from 190 to 200 wheel horsepower. I'm going to use wheel horsepower here because all of the dynos on the modifications are done in wheel horsepower, so this will just keep things simple and make more sense. If you go to the Wikipedia page for the N52, everything is rated in crank horsepower or bhp, so this is not including any drivetrain loss. This is just measured at the engine itself. The highest output in America is the 255 bhp, which on the dyno, usually that 255 crank horsepower equates to about 200 wheel horsepower on the 330is. Depends on the dyno though. So if you're happy with that 190 200 wheel horsepower, you can end the video here. No point in going any further, but if you want more horsepower, we're going to scroll on down. The first thing you're going to want to do before we get into any of these modifications is doing your maintenance. All of your maintenance should be done before you start adding power to these cars, just like any car. If you YouTube search how to bulletproof your N52, my video will come up and I go through every step and part you need to replace to get your N52 up to date on its maintenance and bulletproof it. I also have this link here, frequently asked questions. Go ahead and bookmark that. It has a ton of info for new and old N52 owners. The first mod, which is the most common one you're going to see online that everyone's been doing for the last 20 years, is the 3-stage intake manifold conversion. And you can only do this if you have a non-DISA manifold from the factory. That's going to be your 328 eyes and your 325 eyes. If you have an N51, you already have the 3-stage intake manifold with the DISAs, so you do not need to do this, obviously. And so we're gonna hop over to eBay here. These are kind of pricey just because they're pretty big to ship. I've shipped these before and it does cost a decent amount of money to fit these in a box and ship them. So you can expect anywhere from 150 bucks to $300, something like that. I always recommend people to just pick these up from the junkyard. You can usually get them for about $50. It doesn't matter if they come with DISAs because you need to replace those regardless if you don't know the condition of them, if the last owner didn't replace them ever, because if these DISA valves fail, the pin inside of it gets sucked through these runners and into your engine. And I have personally seen engines that have blown from these DISA valves failing, which they all do at some point. So I'm not a huge fan of the DISA manifolds, but if you are to get one, you absolutely need to replace those DISA valves, which brings us to FCP Euro. These are ridiculously expensive, $900 for genuine, which unfortunately is the only ones that really last long term from everyone I've seen that has replaced them. And if you get from FCP, obviously you can return these and get new ones, but if you don't want to spend that, you can get the Rain. Don't have any personal experience with these, or the Vico, which are much cheaper. But I have seen people have premature failures on the aftermarket as well. So just be careful there, do your research. If you just want to keep it simple and convert your car to a 330i's power output by installing the intake manifold and the 330i tune, a lot of people will go to bimmerlabs.com, which is currently down, which happens like once a year from what I've seen. Basically, they just give you a file, which is the stock 330i tune to flash. That is perfectly fine to do, but it does leave a lot of power on the table. No adjustments made to the tune, it is just a stock file. So if you want to add about 10 to 15 wheel horsepower on top of that, you will want the 22 RPD tune. Doing the stock 330 flash and the 3-stage intake manifold will get us right around to that 200 wheel horsepower. Which the 330i makes stock. But if you want to take it further than that, which I highly recommend if you're going through the trouble of tuning it, you might as well spend the money on the 22 RPD tune. The 22 RPD tune has a ton of R&D done on it, developing this tune on their dyno. You can see that's actually my car there. I've personally been on that dyno and ran it myself probably 200 or 300 times now, developing different tunes and options for you guys in the N52 community. So I highly recommend them because they do care about the N52 and they have spent a lot of time perfecting their tune for it. And so if we scroll down, there's all kinds of options you can do. I have another YouTube video that goes into each of these options and what they do. But yeah, so you guys can check that out for yourselves. There's all kinds of different customization options and ways to flash it. Moving on to the next stage, we kind of went over a little bit of this stuff with the 22 RPD tune and the 3-stage intake manifold. Now you could leave it there with just the tune and intake manifold, but if you want to take it a step further and do all of the easy NA mods and get the most bang for your buck, you're also going to want to grab a set of headers. You can do the Active AutoWorks headers. A lot of guys nowadays are running these HC Racing headers. I'm not affiliated with this company in any way, but I used to run them on my car for years, and I know dozens and dozens of people that also run them without issues. They look very similar to the Active AutoWorks, and it looks like the price just went up a bit. They used to be $300, and they're also out of stock right now, which does happen every few weeks. If you do get those headers, you have to make sure you're getting the correct ones, because I have heard of people getting the incorrect version of them. If you go to my site, bevautoparts.com, click the fact up here. I have an explanation here on those headers. You have to make sure you get the USA version, which are the ones pictured here. You want to make sure these O2 sensor bungs are after these runners here. You don't want them in a single runner like this picture here, which they call their Euro headers. And also these flat gaskets leak, so never use those. You want the donuts, and also I have links to OEM gaskets here, and you'll want to not use the Chinese gaskets because they will leak too. Like it says here, I'm not affiliated, so if you get scammed, don't cry to me about it. Always use PayPal just in case you have any issues because they are in China. So protect yourself with PayPal. And if you're right-hand drive, I've seen guys in the UK running the Gravity Performance headers. Don't have any personal experience with them, but obviously those O2 sensor locations up here are no good. You'll have to use those secondary bungs there and leave these capped off because your car will not run right using those. You can also run S54 headers, which do make more power. It does need a lot of fabrication work. I can go into that in a minute here. Or you can get Super Sprint, which are plug and play, but they are, I think, $1,000 or $1,500, something like that nowadays. But they are equal length, so it is better than the AA or HC Racing headers. The S54 headers are also equal length, but they are also bigger, so they flow more. As for those S54 headers, here are mine, thanks to Adam, a friend of mine who modified these for me. This is an OEM S54 exhaust manifold, and it's been cut right here for the cats on both of them, and then the pipes after that are all custom, which was a lot of work. And also, if you want to keep your air conditioning, you have to cut the first runner and you have to move it out of the way of that compressor and weld it back on. And also you have to cut off the original flanges for the S54, and you have to weld on these N52 flanges. You can use it from a OEM set so that it can bolt to the engine. And also these O2 bungs are too big. The O2 sensor will thread into these, but they won't be deep enough into the collector to read properly. So you need to cut those off as well and weld on some standard O2 sensor bungs, which I have a picture of right here. You can see how it's closer with those O2 sensors. And this is after ceramic coating and getting them all scratched up test fitting. These are the HC Racing headers, and you can see kind of compared to the S54 headers here, the difference. Much bigger pipes and all equal length versus very skinny pipes and unequal length there. And then you can see I converted the connection to the mid pipe to V-band just to make it a little nicer. Moving on, we've got N54 intake or 3-stage intake manifold. So this is a very controversial subject. A lot of people are die-hard 3-stage intake manifold enthusiasts. I personally prefer the N54 because it doesn't have a DESA valve that can grenade your motor, and also it has a very linear power band. But if you're looking for low-end torque, you're going to want that 3-stage intake manifold. And if you go to my FAQ on my website and scroll down, I do have an explanation on which one you should choose right here. Long story short, if your engine doesn't see above 4,500 RPM, you're not getting any benefit to going to the N54 intake manifold. The 3-stage outperforms it up to that point. However, if you spend more time above 4,500 RPM, you will be making more power and be faster with the N54 intake manifold. The other issue is if you have a GM transmission, you can't increase your redline, so you can't fully take advantage of the N54 intake manifold versus a manual car or the ZF6 Auto. You can raise the redline to say 7,500. You spend more time in the N54's power band. And then we've got some math here comparing the N54 intake to the 3-stage. How much the N54 costs is very cheap, 80 to 100 bucks on eBay, or you can get it for like $40 at the junkyard. You do need a 22 RPD tune with the N54 intake, and that will help a lot with the loss of low-end torque because the airflow is much different from the factory intake manifold. And so I wouldn't recommend running this intake manifold unless you are also going to spend the $400 or so on a tune to accommodate for that intake. If you do go with the 3-stage intake manifold, you're looking at 800 bucks for the genuine DESAs, and then additional for the manifold, and then you can do 22 RPD tune, or you can do the free tune from Bimmer Labs if the website comes back up, but you'll make less power. If you have an N51 with the GM transmission, I would generally keep the 3-stage intake manifold unless you boost it, just since you are already down a little bit on torque from the lower compression ratio and you can't increase the red line. The next mod we're looking at is the intake, and I recommend the Dinan Ram with a K&N filter. If we look at a S55 stock airbox, you can see this extra port down here, which draws airflow from the front bumper, versus the N52, this is completely closed off and you only draw air from the grill. So to emulate this, back in the day, Dinan created a airbox modification kit. They gave you this nice plaque here, and it added another duct to your airbox. Came with all this stuff, and basically it just drew air from your brake duct, like you can see here. Unfortunately, they did discontinue it, but luckily this company here, Printables Auto, they made their own design of this. It's pretty cheap, 66 bucks. And this emulates how the Dinan Ram also functioned for much cheaper. And if you go on YouTube, search N52 Dinan Ram, my video should come up and I show how to install that. I use the actual Dinan snorkel, but it's gonna be the same process. And there's a dyno link there too, where the guy gained 15 horsepower. So pretty cool for 60 bucks. Would recommend doing that. And then just use a K&N drop-in filter. That's what came with the BMW Performance intakes originally. So just throw K&N in there and be done with it. You can also run this Turner Motorsport intake. I ran this for a bit on my car. It's a nice product. This dynoed a little bit lower than the Dinan Ram mod, I believe. I did do a dyno back-to-back of the Dinan Ram stock airbox, Grupp M airbox, and the AFE airbox, and they were all pretty close. They all gained over the stock airbox, but otherwise it was pretty close. So really just choose which one you like. The Turner will be a lot louder than the Dinan Ram, but the Dinan Ram should have a bit more low-end torque from what I recall on those dynos. And we've got a video here how to flash your N52, and then here's the video dynoing the setup here. It's also linked on this page with the dyno graph. Here's the HC Racing Headers. That's the 3-stage intake manifold, N54 intake manifold, and then here are the dyno sheets. So this is what I made with the N54 intake and the HC Racing Headers. So 261 wheel horsepower, 231 wheel torque, and you can see there is a bit of a dip here from the N54 intake manifold. And then here is another car that has a similar setup with S54 headers, and this car was also manual, and they made 275 wheel horsepower. Nice gains to be had there. You can see them back to back. You can add a bit more power NA here if you go to E85. The gains over 93, I generally say, are not worth it. It's only like 5 horsepower. So if you have access to 93 octane at the pump, I wouldn't bother because you will need bigger injectors. However, if you are in California, Arizona, or Nevada, and you have their terrible 91 octane, I did pick up power going from E85 that was noticeable over that 91. So if you have access to E85 at the pump and you want to spend some money on injectors and tune, I would recommend getting some E85 in there. You can run E30, E40, or full E85. You will need these injectors here. You can get them on 22RPD.com. And these are going to be 60-pound Bosch injectors, and if you buy these, you will be good for whatever power pretty much that you want to throw at it. You absolutely cannot run these without a tune though. The tune has to accommodate for these or the car will run horrible. Next up, for the ultimate performance on an N52, just bolt-on NA parts, we're looking at 270 to 280 wheel horsepower with the 22 RPD velocity stacks and tune. You're going to need the previous parts that you installed, such as the headers. I'd also recommend getting a high flow muffler. You could have also done this in the previous steps, but you'll definitely want it at this power level to flow enough air, as the stock muffler is a bit restrictive. The rest of the exhaust is pretty fine. Aside from the secondary cats, you can pick up 5 to 8 wheel horsepower from deleting those. Muffler wise, I recommend the Vibrant Ultra Quiet. It's pretty cheap for a quality muffler, 150 bucks, and this is what I have on my car. It's straight through, it sounds good, and it's good quality. So here you can see the first beta version of the Velocity Stacks on my car from a few years ago, and then we've got a render of the production version, and it has this panel here for a ITG filter or a plenum to bolt onto. And we can see some more pictures here of that. So that's with the plenum option, which retains the throttle body here. And then you can see the dyno there. This is the N54 intake manifold. Same modifications versus the 22 RPD Velocity Stack. So as you guys remember, I had that torque dip here on the N54 intake manifold, and that's that brown line. And the Velocity Stacks picked up a nice chunk of torque down there, and also horsepower in that area, while also adding more power at peak as well. So this was a different day in dyno. So I dynoed a little bit lower today. I think it was hotter outside or something. We made 254, 269 with the Velocity Stacks. And here you can see how most people do that secondary cat delete. It's just a couple of pipes welded in their place. If you want it to sound a bit nicer and more refined, you can run Vibrant bottle resonators there in place of them, which will help smooth out the exhaust note. And then here's a video explaining the Velocity Stacks, showing it on the dyno. All right, getting into the fun stuff. Adding some boost here now. The type is supposed to be 325 wheel horsepower. We're looking at the stage 1 supercharger from 22 RPD. This runs about 7 to 8 PSI. At this point, you're definitely not going to want to have a 3-stage intake manifold. You're kind of just asking for trouble with the DESA valves already being a failure point, and now adding pressurized air into the equation. Also, it'll make less power with boost. So get the N54 intake manifold and enjoy the mega linear power band that goes to the moon with power delivery. It just keeps pulling, combining that N54 intake that's already happy to make power at high RPMs, plus the supercharger, which also makes power at high RPMs. So great combo of those two. Throw away the 3-stage intake manifold, sell it, I don't care, get rid of it, and go N54 at this point. And by now you should probably already have these headers as well. You can also do S54 headers. All the dynos I have done on this are with the HC Racing headers. The S54 headers or Super Sprints should make a bit more power than the cheapos. So this is what you get with the 22 RPD supercharger kit. You get the ESS G1 blower, super reliable and durable blower. They use it on Mustangs, M3s, all kinds of stuff. You get your bracket, intake pipe, K&N filter, and a smaller pulley, custom from 22 RPD to increase the boost. Now we've got bottles of supercharger oil and also high flow injectors, which are good to about 500 wheel horsepower on pump. So plenty of headroom there with these injectors. So if you want to upgrade later on and add more boost, you're already good to go on those, so you save some money there. Spark plugs are also included. They're step colder iridiums. They are very durable as well. I'm on, I think, the same set as when I first installed my supercharger kit. I just gapped them down a little bit for more boost. Also get a heavy duty belt for the supercharger. Okay, so I got a video here on that. I made 408 wheel horsepower at this point when I made that video. So kind of a rundown here on that supercharger kit. Anyways, onto the dyno. So we made 7 PSI this day and it hit 326 horsepower at the wheels, 250 foot-pounds of torque. So this is what a proper linear power band looks like. We are making a 45-degree angle from idle all the way up to 7,000. You can rev it out even more for more power, and it's just gonna keep that same angle here. So a really smooth power delivery. Feels like NA, except you added a buttload of power on top of it, and so very controllable and smooth delivery there. This kit does not come with the methanol injection that the next stages do, so it's a little more simple, less work to install. You don't have to refill the meth tank, but that being said, you don't have a way to cool the air, so you're very limited at how much boost you can run, and you're kind of topped out at the 7-8 psi range without adding an intercooler or meth injection. Transmission-wise, I haven't seen any issues on any transmission with these. That's a question I get a lot, is I have my GM transmission, can it take boost? Yeah, as far as I have seen, as long as your transmission isn't chopped and it's already, in good condition to begin with. I haven't seen any issues at this power level here. Manual's fine with a healthy clutch. The ZF is totally fine, obviously assuming it's healthy. I never had any issues here at all on my ZF6 and my 330i. Moving on to stage 2. Stage 1 was basically your foundation for boost. You got those injectors, spark plugs, supporting mods to handle this power. And the difference here going to stage 2 is we're upping the boost to 10 psi and we're adding water meth injection. So what the water meth injection does is it's sprayed into your charge pipe, and by doing so you're instantly cooling the hot air that's coming out of your supercharger before it gets into your engine. And also the methanol is a high octane fuel, so at the same time we are boosting the octane of your regular gas you have in the tank as this is being shot into your intake valves. So you're getting an octane boost, intake air temperature is dropping, and also we are getting some cylinder cooling with the water meth injection, which is a great thing to have for safety. A little more detail here. Suppresses knock, lowers intake temps, blah, blah, blah. So you can get a little more aggressive on the tune as well with the meth. So that's the main difference between stage 1 and 2. I always recommend people just start with the stage 2 so that you have that meth kit right from the get-go. And 10 psi is still pretty conservative. Obviously, we want you to have those headers already and the N54 intake manifold to support this airflow. This is the meth kit here. It's the Snow stage 2.5. It works good. I still have this on my car as well. Comes with a nice gauge too that is also a boost gauge, so you can put that on your dash somewhere and you can see your boost. And also it has a graph that shows how much methanol is being sprayed. Here you can see my car with the N54 intake manifold, and we did a custom intake here. And then there's a little methanol solenoid heading over there, and you can see those upgrade injectors with the red stripes on them. And that is 350 horsepower at the wheels. Again, we're maintaining that linear power band, and we added torque obviously as well, and that is still only 7,000 RPM here. So not even increasing past the stock red line. The stage 2 kit is a good middle ground. This is like a nice, not having to add too much supporting mod type deal. Also, I haven't seen an issue transmission wise on the stage 2 kit. Again, assuming it's healthy. If your trans is slipping already and you add more power, it's gonna slip worse. So assuming you got a healthy trans or healthy clutch, I haven't seen any issues at this point. So something to keep in mind there. 400 wheel horsepower going into the stage 3 kit. We up the boost another 2 psi to 12. Same deal as the last one. You've still got the meth injection. We're just adding more boost. Stage 3 costs the same money as stage 2. It's just a different pulley. So we're spinning that supercharger faster to produce more boost and more horsepower. So it really starts ripping here. Some really good power out of an N52 here. 400 wheel. It feels great. Obviously still got those supporting mods. At this point, this is where you will need to upgrade some stuff on a manual transmission. We have the original customer that had this kit built on their car years ago. Their clutch started slipping at around the 300 foot-pounds of torque range, and so they had an OEM Plus setup put in with a new OEM clutch and a 550i pressure plate, which can hold more torque. This feels very OEM, nice daily setup, but also capable of holding more power. So that's something you will need to do at some point if you are manual to handle this extra torque. If you have the ZF Auto, just flash XHP, do your solenoids fluid. I recommend the Adrenaline SS fluid for more power. And then obviously make sure you already took care of those mechatronic seals and the pan filter as well. GM transmission could be a little iffy at this point. I do have a friend of mine, Seth, who ran nitrous on his GM transmission in his 128i, and I believe he was running about a 200 shot with a built motor, and he was doing dig racing on the GM trans, and his trans didn't slip, so that's kind of a good indicator, as he would make a lot more torque than this with nitrous, probably making around 400. So something to keep in mind there. Might be worth looking into swapping to a ZF transmission or a manual transmission at this point if you have a GM and it starts to slip. All right, here's about where I am at now with my car. 500 wheel horsepower. This is the stage 4 supercharger kit. We are up in the boost some more, and we need a bit more fuel to support this power. Stage 4 is not listed on 22RPD's website. You will have to email them to get that, but they can put that together for you. So we're going down to size on the pulley again for more boost, and we are going to need a bigger fuel pump. Stock one's gonna be tapped out, so we're gonna go with the Walbro 535. That's what I run on my car now. You could do a 450 if you're just running pump, possibly, but I'd recommend the 535 because it can handle this power on ethanol blends as well. It doesn't cost much more. Price-wise on that Walbro, if you modify your fuel pump assembly yourself and drop it in, you know, 160, 170 bucks for genuine. Be very careful with who you buy these from, as there are a lot of fakes. I haven't vetted this company at all. It's just the first one that popped up on Google. Do your own research, make sure you get a legit one. I'm not saying this one's not, I'm not familiar with them. What I run on mine, because I'm lazy and I didn't feel like playing with my fuel covered pump to modify it, I just bought this Precision Raceworks one, which costs a lot more money. I think we're still on Black Friday sales now, so discounted 400 bucks. I think I paid $450. And the nice thing about this one is you just drop it in, plug and play. You don't have to modify connectors or Dremel anything or zip tie anything. It's already all done for you. So that was worth the time savings for me. Not affiliated with Precision, but I've been running this for a while on my car, and it's been good. With that big fuel pump, you're going to be drawing more amps from your EKP. So you're gonna want an EKP cooler to keep that cool. This is the company I use, Arc Terminator. Again, no affiliation. This is just the products I use on my personal car. They have a bunch of different stuff. I've used a couple of their products. They've all been good. So basically what this does is you just install it onto your EKP, which is the module that controls your fuel pump. When you go for a big fuel pump, it pulls more power through it, gets hot. So this adds a fan and heat sinks as well that you glue onto the circuit board. And so that'll keep your EKP happy. Very reasonable pricing on these, 45 bucks. They also sell a full drop-in plug-and-play EKP, which I think is like $120, something like that. And that comes with everything already done. And you just plug it in and they upgrade the internals on them too. But if you want to go the cheap route, you can just replace the case to keep that EKP cool. Again, China headers, S54 headers, whatever you want. You need headers at this point. N52 manifold still. And so at this point, we're going to add another methanol nozzle before the supercharger. And this is kind of my jerry-rigged way that I did it back in the day, just to test everything out. It looks a lot nicer now. But as you can see here, we have a tap in the intake. Air comes in through here, goes into the supercharger. And so we're adding the second nozzle here. Very small amount, 125 cc's is fine. And what that's gonna do is cool off this entire intake pipe and all the air going into it. And it's also gonna cool off the internals of your supercharger, which is really nice benefit there. To do that, you just buy a kit from Snow Performance, and they add a T-fitting here. So every time your methanol is spraying, it is splitting into the supercharger and also into your intake. I recommend also buying this Snow Performance solenoid if you have the methanol tank mounted in your trunk. This will prevent gravity feeding of the methanol into your intake. I would not recommend any push fittings like this on a methanol system. This was just temporary. The Snow Performance and the stuff you get from 22RPD have these fittings here, which are much more secure. And we can take a look here, this nice T-fitting here, and you can see that it has these locking fittings on it, push to connect, and another nozzle holder here. So you'll buy this, 42 bucks, and then you'll buy a 125 cc nozzle to put into that, and you'll connect that to your existing methanol system. You can even do that on the stage 2 kit as well, or the stage 3, but I would really recommend it going into stage 4 here because we're spinning that supercharger a lot faster. Here you can see that EKP cooler kit. I believe they've updated the design now, and it's no longer the snail on top. It's like the pictures I showed you a moment ago. And this just connects to your fuse box here. Nice harness there. Full video on the 480 wheel horsepower setup here on my YouTube. 500 horsepower supercharged, blah, blah, blah. You can check that out if you like. And here is the dyno graph. Again, we are keeping this linear power band. This is a huge benefit with centrifugal superchargers. We keep this very smooth power delivery all the way to redline. And as you can see here, we up the redline to 7500 to increase the boost because we're spinning that supercharger faster. And this is really a fantastic dyno graph here. We've got a lot of area under the curve and we are staying in that power band after we shift. So this feels really nice when you're driving it. Now transmission wise, I have seen the ZF6 in good condition with good fluid and all maintenance done, solenoids done, holding this power on the ZF6 19 that comes in the 330i and also the Z4, some of the Z4 models. The GM, I would be a bit suspicious at this power level. You can try it, but just plan in your budget for replacing that transmission with a ZF or a manual transmission. And if you're at this point and you want to swap a manual transmission in, you really might as well go with an N54 manual transmission. They are really sturdy and they're much easier to find than the N52 ones. They require a little bit of modification. I can't really explain all that here in this video, but if you look on the forums and do your own research, there are people that have documented how to do that. Long story short, you elongate some holes in the bell housing and you leave a bolt or two out so that it lines up. Now, if you want to stay with an automatic transmission, I would recommend going with the 6HP21. I have a guide posted under blogs on the site as well, how to make that work on rear wheel drive. All wheel drive I have not done, so I can't help you there. However, for the same price or cheaper, depending if you're doing labor yourself, if you have access to the tools necessary to do this job, 2025, a lot of people are doing the 8HP 45 swap. And the cool thing about this is you can get one for about 500 bucks to your front door. There are certain ones that you can use that don't require the use of the CAN TCU or a turbo Lamic. There is a company, NDH Automotive. I've talked a lot with Alex, who's the owner. He helped me make the swap work on my car. I was one of the first cars that had this working, and basically he's got this whole retrofit guide here on E90 posts, and you have to do some wiring and programming and stuff like that, but it's a pretty thorough guide here on exactly how to do that and what parts you need. You need some modules from LCI cars if you don't already have them, but that's all here in the guide. And if you are really frugal with your money and you're doing the labor yourself, this can be done for as cheap as around $800. I spent a little bit more on mine. I spent about $1,200 just because I bought expensive fluid and I bought the first modules that I found, not necessarily the cheapest ones, just so I could get it done quickly. So, you know, 500 bucks transmission and then fluid, pan, modules, stuff like that. This is proven working on rear wheel drive N52s, but if you have all wheel drive, I'm not too familiar. I haven't looked into it, but I think most of the all wheel drive guys are running a CAN TCU, so plan for another $1,500 to $2,000 for that controller, depending on whether you buy their harness or not, for a plug and play solution. And that's going to wrap it up, guys. Thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Appreciate everyone that has been following what I've been doing with the N52s. If you have any questions for me, leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of this video and anything else you would like to see a video on in the future. Bye.